Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to load scenes and to quit the game. We're going to be using some new functions that we've not met before. That's the application.loadLevel and application.quit functions to load new levels and to quit the game in our script. So we've already got a script in the game that gets triggered whenever we press a button, and we want to make that actually not just log to the console, but actually carry out the actions we want. And once we've done that, we'll look a little bit more about the limitations of application.quit because it doesn't quite work in all contexts. If we use application.quit, say, in the web, it's not going to have any effect. And we'll see that and we'll list all the things that application.quit can't do and where it doesn't quite work the way we expect. So let's go straight to the game and jump in. So we've got our Unity editor right here, and we've got our game. And right now I've got a start game, which I'm in right now, and some empty games elsewhere. And what I want to do is for my start button, so when I click it, instead of logging something out to the console as it does now, let's take a look. I press play, I open my console, I press start, and we should see that something gets logged out to the console. And that's all it does right now. Instead of doing that, I want my start button to take me to my next scene. And we already have a level manager that gets called whenever we actually press the button, and the only thing it does right now is to log something, right? And we've got it loading a request for a game. And we said that the things we want to do is to turn the click that clicks on the start button, instead of going to a logging to actually do something. Well, how do we do that? Well, we can just use the application.loadLevel. So the application.loadLevel, you'll see it being auto-completed. It's actually right here, load level as a method, and we can pass in the name of the level we want to load. So by just adding this line, this application.loadLevel new name, and give it the name, that will then take our start button whenever we press it, and it will take us to our game scene. So let's take a look at that in action. I jump back into Unity, I press play, and then if I click start, load level game -1 could not be loaded because it has not been added to the build settings. I don't know whether you can see that through the plate-in, so let me pause the game. You can see this big bright red arrow with an exclamation mark. Something went wrong. So what went wrong? Well, what's actually going on is we started to play a game and we tried to load a level that wasn't prepared. We need to tell Unity, these are the levels that you prepare, and these are the levels that you should be ready to jump to. Right now it doesn't know. So how do we do that? Well, that's in our build settings. So we can go File, Build Settings, or we can use the shortcut shown in the menu. So if you go to the File menu and go Build Settings, we'll have this window pop up and open. And we can see a bunch of options in the platform. You can see all the builds of Unity, everything from Windows Phone to the web. And really, we don't really care about this right now. We're going to stick with the PC, Mac, and Linux standalone build, which is what we're currently on. But what we can notice is that the scenes in build list is actually completely empty. So you can see the scene here, the scenes in build, that's empty, and that's a problem. Basically what we're saying here is no scenes should be put together when you build a game, which is not what we mean. So how do we add scenes in build? Well, we go to our projects, we select the scenes, and I'm going to select all of them at once. And then I can drag my scenes into my scene list. And the order matters here because the order is actually relevant. The first one in the order will be the first one to be run. So when we've got an order right now, we can then select the start scene, for example, click it, and then we can drag it to the top. And I'm just moving stuff around until the start scene is at the top. Now in any build I make, the start scene will be the first to be loaded, and then my start scene will continue as normal. So now I've got this, I don't need to build and run. I can just close this window once I've created my scene list and then press play again. And when I click start, we should see that we now jump to a different scene. And obviously this is an empty scene, there's no distinguishing feature between my game, lose and win scene. Right now the only scene that has anything in it is the start scene, but we can see the start button has actually done its job to jump us to another scene. So awesome. It is now your turn. What I want you to do is, well, now we can jump to the start scene. We are not going to worry about quick right now, but what I want you to do is create a button to return to the start scene from the game scene. Now we can jump from the start scene to the game scene. I want us to be able to jump backwards from the game to the start scene, and I want you to create a new button that's going to do that for us. So use what you've learned already, use the code that's already there. You don't need to rewrite the level manager, you don't need to rewrite the level manager object or the level manager script. You can just use Control C or Command C to copy them and then paste them in the new scene. So you'll need to grab the existing level manager and copy that across to your new scene, and then also create a new button in your new scene that takes us back. And that's just going to be a little debug button as an exercise for us so we can jump back and forth between those two scenes. So I'll see you very soon. So how did it go? Did you manage to get a button that jumps back from the game scene to the start scene? Let's see how we would do that. So I'm now in my Unity editor and I've got my start scene here. What I want to copy is my level manager and my start button. So I will not worry about the start button too much for now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the level manager, copy it, and then open my game scene and then paste it in. So I click again on the hierarchy, paste it in, and I can see the level manager turning up in my hierarchy in the game scene as well. Now I need a button. I need a button in my scene right now. So how do I do that? Well, I can either do a create a new button by going game object, UI, and then create a text and then do all the button addition and stuff like that again. Or I can cheat again. I copy my button across. So I'm going to save my game, jump back into my start scene, grab my button and my event system, because remember, we need an event system, and my canvas, copy them across to my game scene and paste them in. Here we go. Now I've got a canvas and I've got all sorts of stuff in there. The only thing I actually want is my one of the buttons, so I'm going to remove everything else, delete them, and use my quit button, rename it to back button, and change the text, and then go to my handler, and now it's missing because we've copied them separately. So I'm going to grab my level manager and put it in my back button. So I've got my level manager, drag it into my on-click handler for my back button, if it lets me. Here we go. And then select the right function, which is level manager, load level, and this time instead of loading game, I'm obviously going to be loading a different one, which is start. So now if I press the game, I go back to my start scene. Don't forget to save your changes to the game scene. I press play, and then I click on start. I've got my game scene right here, and I press back, I'm back on my start scene. And that's kind of what we were expecting, how to go back and forth using buttons and load level. So that's awesome. What's the next thing to do? Well, the next thing to do is to get Quit to work and look at a little bit more about how Quit works and what we can do with Quit. So it's pretty simple in terms of the code. Quit is just another application function, and we can use application.quit, and that will do exactly what we expect it to generally. So we've got application.quit, we can save, and then we can jump back and try it out in our editor, and we'll see what the effect is. So now I press quit. I've got the request coming up. You can see it in the console. However, my application doesn't pause. Why is that? Well, we've just hit the first limitation of application.quit. Application.quit works great if you're making a build. Application.quit works great if you're making a build for the PC and the consoles. However, it is limited on the web build and the debug build. So this is the debug build. This is kind of the debug in editor build, and quit will have no effect in that case. It will also have no effect if you're in the web. If you create a web plugin and use the web plugin, then your web build will have no application.quit. Clicking it will have no effect. It's also really important to understand that while it will have an effect on mobile phone platforms, so if you have iOS, Android, or Windows, most of those platforms, the kind of the guidelines for app developers means that you shouldn't quit your application yourself. You should let the player and the operating system manage the application state, in which case application.quit is actually a bad pattern to fall into. It's a bad practice, and if you try and submit an application to the App Store with a quit button, it'll actually be rejected, for example, on the iOS App Store. So those are the little limitations of application.quit. But now we can try and build a new build. So we go into File, Build Settings, grab the right one, click Build and Run. I'll just select a random location. I don't really care where it's loaded. I just want to show you the example. And I'm going to choose a random graphics size. And then we've got our app powered by Unity, etc., etc. And we should see our first scene. Welcome to Number Wizard, Puny Humans. And if I press quit here, it will actually take me back to my desktop as we expect it to, which is great. So that's just to show you the application.quit button working as you'd expect it to. So what's next? Well, let's take a review of a little bit of how we load the scene, how all this is wired together. So if you remember, we have two objects. So those are game level objects. Those are the start button and the level manager. Those are the actual things we're moving around with, and we can see them in the editor. In our start scene, for example, this is the level manager object, and this is the start button object right here in the hierarchy. Now, if we go into those objects, they each have a component. The start button has a button component, and the level manager has a level manager component. And we can also see this in our editor. If we jump back, we can see that when we have the level manager selected, the components are all shown in the inspector. So you've got a transform component, which is default for all objects. And then we have a level manager script component. And that's the component we're talking about. Similarly, the start button as a button component inside of its inspector. We can look at the inspector here. It has several components, including a transform, a canvas renderer, a text, etc., and a button script component. So those are the components. If we jump back, what the start buttons component also has an on-click event handler, and that's represented in the Unity editor by at the bottom, there's a bottom of the button component, there's an on-click list, and we can change that and add things to it. So right now we have a reference to the level manager object, which is this guy here in the hierarchy, and we also have a reference to a function we want to call. So that's the next thing we want to think of, is there is now a function in level manager, and what happens is the on-click event handler has a reference to that function, and whenever the button is clicked, it actually calls it. So that's actually what's happening in the game and how things are wired together in our scene. Okay, awesome. I hope it's been useful. I hope you can see how to wire things together now and how to create buttons that quit and change scenes. And you also know a little bit more about the limitations of the quit function in application.quit. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you in another one. Bye for now.